Have you ever had a situation where you feel like you barely made it out alive? Anybody had one of those situations? Mine was when I was 16 years old. I had my first truck was a 1996 Ford Bronco, a 1994 Ford Bronco, and I had it lifted up on big tires and loud pipes, all the annoying teenager things that happen with young people, right? Now I'm the old person, and I complain when somebody pulls up behind me at the light with a sound system. I'm like, come on, turn it. Nobody wants to hear that. I've become the old man. But I was on my way home from church one night. I was 16 years old. It was wet. It was rainy. And on the way home, I go to get off the interstate to go get off the exit where we lived. The exit had this off-ramp that kind of looped around and back underneath the interstate to go onto the road. If you're not driven anywhere other than Texas, this is not like the norm for everybody where you have the side roads and all the things. So you had to kind of loop around and go underneath the interstate to this road. So I come off the interstate, and evidently I was going a little bit too fast, as a 16-year-old does many times. And I come, and all of a sudden, as I'm driving on an off-ramp, my truck turns sideways down the off-ramp. And it was during the time of like Fast and Furious, so it's kind of cool in one way. But I turned sideways and kind of drifted all the way down this off-ramp sideways in my Bronco. And the whole time, I'm white knuckling the steering wheel as tight as I can. I'm praying, and I'm like, Lord. And I'm like, if somebody was there was nobody in my car, thankfully, because it would have been embarrassing if they would have heard all the things that was going through my mind. But I finally come to a stop. I didn't go off the road. I didn't hit a curb. I didn't flip over the Bronco. None of those things. I just stopped in the middle of the off-ramp, and I pull off to the side, and I said the most used words in those moments when we have kind of a life-changing, like, oh my gosh, I barely made it out alive moment. I paused and had my hand still on the steering wheel and said, thank God. You ever had one of those moments? You ever had one of those, maybe it's a work accident, maybe it was a car wreck, a near car wreck, maybe cutting yourself in the kitchen unexpectedly when you're prepping dinner, and you just all the things that can come up when you think about these near, like, wow, I barely made it out alive. Today, we're going to look at the story of King David. Before he was officially king, he finds himself in one of those moments that his life is kind of in danger. And he makes his way out of this dangerous situation, and he gives this entire psalm that we're going to study is about him giving praise and thanks to God for rescuing him and for saving him. Thank God. We're going to be looking at, for the next 3 weeks, Psalm 34, one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. And it's just short 3-week series that we're going to break this up in. And in this, there's 22 verses in this chapter of Psalm 34, but they're packed full of just incredible truth. It's like line after line of just getting like punched in the face with the truth of the gospel, like over and over. And so we decided, instead of spending 1 week on it, we're going to break it up into 3 weeks and allow it to really just grab our hearts this morning. So if you have your Bibles, Psalm 34, chapter 34, verse 1 through 7, Here we go. I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all of my fears. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. In this passage, in this chapter, Psalm 34, the context to this psalm is really, really important, as it is with all Scripture. We want to make sure and understand that we are reading and studying the Word of God in the context of what it was meant for, and what we are trying to understand in this. So we're not taking things and picking them out of the Scriptures and making it something that was never intended to be. We always say this, is that we need to be reminded that the Scripture is written for us, but not about us. Scripture is written for us, but not about us. And so we need to make sure we're paying attention to this. For the background of this Psalms, we're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 21. 1 Samuel chapter 21. And we're going to look through this just briefly. I'm not going to break this down verse by verse, but I want to give you the context of what's happening here. Verse 10 is where we're going to start. And it says this, and David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. And so he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane in their hands and made marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Then Achish said to the servants, "Behold, you see this man is mad. Why have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come in to my house?" King David, before he's officially king, is fleeing from King Saul, right? He's been anointed. The David and Goliath story has already happened, and he's been anointed as this king, and Saul notices, and God removes his hand of blessing from Saul, puts it on David, and Saul is furious, and he's trying to kill David. He's a threat to his kingdom, to his rule, to his reign, and so he's like, "Hey, I'm going to take David out." And so David flees, and he ends up with the King Achish in the nation of Gash. The people, as he arrives, have already heard about this great king warrior named David. It talks about him singing like Saul killed his thousands, David 10,000s. This kind of precedent comes before him that he's this great warrior, and so these servants are talking about him. And so what David knew is this. David knew that if he was to stick around by King Achish, here's what he knew, is that king would see him as a threat, and then that king eventually was going to take him out and kill him, or have him removed, or put in prison, something along those lines. But more than likely, this is the ancient world, not kind, right? Was not very, very kind to those that were an enemy, and so they would have more than likely killed David. And so David finds himself in this situation where he's fleeing King Saul. He flees to Achish, and all of a sudden he realizes this is not a safe place either, right? This is one of the funniest passages in all the scripture to me, because David acts like a literal crazy person, like put him in a straitjacket kind of crazy person, right? Lets his spit run down his beard. Like, who does that? No one, right? No one in their right mind. He starts writing stuff on the doors. He's acting so crazy that finally the king's like, this guy has lost his mind. He's lost his mind. So they release him. And it's because of this situation that David finds himself in, this difficult context, which makes the first verse of this psalm so much sweeter. Remember, his life is in danger, flees, and it's in danger again. And this is what he says in verse 1 of Psalm 34. And he says, "I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth." Think about the situation here for a moment. His life was in danger, not once, but now twice. And his first words out of his mouth in the psalm is, "I will bless the Lord at all times." We use this word "bless" all the time, don't we? Somebody sneezes, "God bless you," right? Or if you've grown up in the South, if you don't like somebody, you say, "Bless your heart," right? That's what people typically say. Blessing the Lord, this is really giving thanks. This is giving thanks for what the Lord has already done. Much like when your car turns sideways down an off-ramp and you realize that you didn't get wrecked, or you didn't wreck, or you didn't get hurt, you just thank the Lord. Notice what he says, though. He says, "I will bless the Lord at all times." All times. This is one of those lines and statements that we may even have a sign around our house that's in scrolly font that's hanging on the wall somewhere. "I will bless the Lord at all times." But it's easier in theory than in practice, isn't it? It's easier in theory than in practice, because when we walk through difficult times, we don't just break into a praise dance in the middle of a difficult season, right? A few months ago, when Lindsay walked into our home on Friday night and it was flooded, we didn't just start, "Oh, thank you, Lord, for this." You ever had those situations where it's difficult, it's challenging, you don't understand? Praise is not our go-to. It's not it's not the human nature that we have to go into praise. It's very different. But here's the thing that we have to see, is that our faith is seen or revealed in how we bless and praise when things aren't going well. Our faith is seen in how we bless or praise many times by how we do that when things aren't going, or when things aren't going the way that we think they should go. Because many times that's the root of the problem, isn't it? Is we don't get our way. Life is not going the way that I think it should go, and so I'm not going to praise in this situation because this is not good. It's easy to praise when you're on the mountaintop. When it seems like all your prayers are being answered as yes, and you've got money in the bank and everything is secure. Wow, everything is great. It's easy to praise in those moments, but it is a deeper level of praise that we come to in blessing and thanking the Lord for what he has done when we're walking in the middle of the valley. And we cannot forget, as followers of Jesus, that we're being led by the Good Shepherd, not just on the mountaintop, but also in the valley of the shadow of death. So are we willing to praise him when it doesn't feel like the circumstances around us are worth praising? Are we willing to go to that level? It's a deeper level of praise. Now, here's another aspect of this. Some of us, in my opinion, I'm going to broad stroke a little bit, but in my opinion, I think some of us have a hard time with praise. Specifically, a lot of men. Now, this is not to say that everyone is to worship the same way. This is not to say that we want to be prescriptive of what worship has to look like or needs to look like. This is not to bring judgment on anybody here that worships differently. That is not what we are trying to do. But worship is more about the posture of our hearts than the posture of our body, isn't it? Right? You can scream and dance and run and shout and do all the things, but if your heart is not right, then it's pointless. But many times, the posture of our heart will be revealed by the posture of our body. Many times, it will be revealed by the posture of our body. And so when we think about praise, when we think about what, in the middle of this, I hear people say this, I'm just not a very vocal person. I'm not a very emotional person. But then I see those same people with 90,000 to 100,000 people in an arena shouting at the top of their lungs, doing chants that they do in Aggie land that I don't know what in the world is going on, right? If you didn't grow up around the Aggies, it's like walking into a cult. I'm sorry. It's weird. That was rude. That was rude. I'm not anti-Aggie, but you know what I'm talking about. There's always one whoop, right? Every room you go in. The scriptures, though, they're filled with commands and encouragements for us to lift our voices, to lift our hands, to clap, to shout, to do all the things. Many times, the things that the scriptures command us to do, we would look at somebody in church and say, what's that person's problem? But that's what the scripture's commanding us to do, like worship. Lift your hands, shout, sing to the Lord, make clashing sounds with cymbals. What would you do if somebody came in here with a bunch of cymbals and just started banging them in the middle of the service? We'd escort that person out, wouldn't we? You're not on rhythm. You got to get. That's why we outlawed tambourines around here. I'm not saying that you have to shout loud to worship God, but I am saying that God is inviting us to worship God. And many times throughout the scriptures, we see him giving us commands to lift hands, to sing, to shout, to clap, to do all the things. And I think that sometimes we get so dignified in our lives that we miss the opportunity to worship. Let's not miss it. Because here's where I land. No matter where you land on what worship should look like or has to look like, when you understand what God has brought you through, to me, our natural response to that is worship. When you understand what God has brought you out of, that's why preaching the gospel to ourselves and preaching the gospel on Sundays continually is so important. For us not to realize, or for us not to think that we get to a certain point that we have grown up and matured enough to where we don't need to hear the gospel anymore. But when we understand it, when we see it, when we live it, and we know what God has rescued us from, it's like, man, I can't help but worship. And then he goes on and he says, his praise shall be continually in my mouth. His praise shall be continually in my mouth. This is, some translations say, on my lips. His praise shall be continually on my mouth or on my lips. Here's the question that I want us to wrestle with for a moment. Is praise only a Sunday thing for us, or is it continual? Is praise only a Sunday thing, or is it continual for us? Is it something that happens in our life throughout the week? In our work day, when we get home, when we spend time with our families and our children and our spouses? Is praise only on Sundays, or is it continual? Now, this is one of those lines that's a little bit harder. This is one of those verses that you read and it stings a little bit. Because we can probably all pick out moments from this morning because it was stressful getting out of the house, right? Anybody get stressful leaving for church on Sunday morning? Now, all of you got it figured out? I've seen your faces when you walk in. You can tell, like, they had a fight on the way. You think no one knows, but we know. This is a hard one. His praise shall be continually in our mouths. It's not just on Sunday mornings, and if it's not in our mouths all the time, if we're not continually giving praise and thanks to the Lord, then we need to be asking ourselves why. Why am I not giving praise and thanks to the Lord continually? James chapter 3, verse 10 says this, "From the same mouth come blessing and cursing, my brothers. These things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water." Blessing and cursing. It's the wrestling that we walk through, right? Because it's like, I want to praise the Lord, but I know the power of my tongue. James talks about it often, doesn't he? His whole book is continually driving this thread throughout the book that's like, hey, pay attention to your words because they're important. They carry life and death in the power of your tongue. They can set a forest fire set ablaze by the power of your tongue. So we understand the power of it. We also know that, hey, I'm a human, and I say some things from time to time that I don't really want to say or I don't mean to say. James chapter 1, verse 19, going back to that book again. He says this, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." This is a verse that I have been repeating over and over to myself recently. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. What happens when we say things that we say something that is not necessarily a curse word, but I'm saying we talk with unwholesome talk in our life or our mouth or whatever. It happens usually when we speak quickly, doesn't it? You kind of like, boom, just off the tip of your tongue, boom, just say it really quickly. Or it happens when you're mad and you're angry at something. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. I'm preaching to myself, if y'all don't know that. I'm just repeating it to myself over and over. Let's look at verse 2. And he says this, "My soul makes us boast in the Lord. My soul makes us boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad." My soul makes us boast in the Lord. Now, if you've ever done an Enneagram test, this would be familiar to you. Has anybody ever done like Strength Finders or Enneagram? You ever done those things? Raise your hand. Some of you are like, I have no clue what that is. Is that witchcraft? Maybe. I don't know. But it's a. I shouldn't have said that. Sorry, I should not have said that. But it's basically a personality test to tell you who you are, and all those things can be helpful and not helpful at the same time. But I am an Enneagram 3, meaning this: I am a performer. So every person has a number that says, here's your kind of. Like where you go to normally. This is when you're healthy, you're this person. So I'm a performer. So I enjoy, like some of you, if I was to bring you on the stage and give you a microphone and say, could you preach today? You would fall in paralyzed fear on the stage, right? For me, I'm like, I love this. I love that I get to do this. And part of me is that I'm also very competitive. And so for me, like I want to hear people tell me, now please don't do this after the service, right? I should have not talked about hugging last week because I was very self-conscious about hugging everybody last week. But so don't come up after me in service and say, oh, you did such a great job today, Pastor Derek. Like that's not what I'm looking for. But I want to hear people that say like, hey, I want you to notice that I'm doing a good job. That's my personality. I want people to notice it. And when you're competitive like I am, this verse is hard. Because I don't just want to win, but I also want the credit. Any competitive people? Yeah? You remember that line in sports where the coaches would always say, like, there's no I in team, and you're like, eh. My mind used to go to, yeah, but there's a me. What do we boast in? What do we boast in? In a culture that begs us to brag about the things that we have or acquire or come up with in this life, right? There's entire platforms that have been built on just simply bragging on yourself. There's a culture that says, I'm going to boast in myself. I'm going to boast in my new vehicle. I'm going to boast in all the newest things, right? Apple has built their entire model off of making you think that you don't have the best iPhone. Yours is totally fine. But still, after everyone is released, there's a long line at the store of people going into debt for an iPhone, isn't there? What we talk about the most can reveal what we value the most. What we talk about the most can reveal what we value the most. If you were to inventory your life and your speech, would boasting in the Lord be at the top of the list or near the top of the list? Would boasting in the Lord be near the top of the list or in the top of the list where somebody could look at your life, take an inventory and say, man, they boast in the Lord a lot? Or is it more about they boast in themselves a lot? They boast in their possessions a lot. Would the overarching theme be blessing? Do people around you know what God has saved you from? Do the people that you work with every single day, do they know what's most important in your life? If we're boasting in the Lord as he commands us to do here, they should. And then he goes on and he says, let the humble hear and be glad. Let the humble hear and be glad. Now, this word humble, it's not just a matter of our mind. This is not humbleness from a psychological standpoint. Some translations actually say, let the afflicted hear and be glad. This is, like the circumstances of life have a funny way of humbling us, don't they? You think like you've got your life figured out, and then all of a sudden you realize you're in your mid-40s and you don't know what you're doing with your life. Your career has kind of come to a screeching halt, and you're like, well, I don't know anything about my life. You realize and you understand, like, hey, life will humble us. And David is seeing this in this psalm, and he's like, man, let the humble, let the broken, let the afflicted, those that have been through some life, let them hear and be glad. Have you ever been humbled by life? Have you ever been humbled by the Lord? Paul uses language similar to this when he talks about boasting in his weakness. To boast in your weakness, that's such a foreign concept in the West, isn't it? Because we like to be proud people where we don't need to walk in humbleness because I have everything that I need. I have all my bills are paid, right? I've got money to bank. I'm saving for retirement, saving for kids' college and kids' weddings and all the things. And it's like everything's pretty good in my life. Walk in humbleness. Walk in affliction. It doesn't mean that we think less of ourselves. It doesn't mean we talk down to ourselves, but it is a recognition of the frailty of life. That we are not as in control of our lives as we like to think that we are. But notice where David lands this verse, and he says, I want you to be glad, to hear and be glad. Again, similar to the writings of Paul, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 10 says this. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Have you ever had one of those seasons where it's kind of this phrase that we have where it's like everything just seems to be going wrong, nothing's going right, nothing's working, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, maybe it's a season, and you just kind of get this phrase in your life where it's like I can't take it anymore, I'm kind of at the end of myself. You ever had those? Can I give you some encouragement? That's the best place you could be. That's the best place you could be. When you get to the end of yourself and you realize, like, I have nothing left. It's in our weakness that we realize and understand the power and the strength of God in our lives. It's when we get to the end of our rope that we realize, like, hey, this is a good place to be because now I am fully dependent on the Lord. It's not easy to see it in the middle of it. But it's important to recognize. Let's look at verse 3. He says, oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. There is something special that happens when the people of God join together and we lift our voices, we lift our hands. Like there is nothing sweeter to the Lord's ears when he hears his children worshiping him. I'm telling you, there's nothing sweeter. I'm not saying we're going to take away instruments or anything like that. That's not where I'm going with this. And some of you who grew up Church of Christ, you're like, yes, this is the point. Here's the thing. There is something powerful about hearing your voices lifted up to the King of the universe. Congregational singing, because we have so much music now, we miss out on the beauty of congregational singing. There's something powerful that happens when you hear everybody lifting their voice, and it's like, wow. And if we feel like that and we get a sense of awe and wonder, what do you think God is feeling like when he hears us singing like that? Oh, magnify the Lord with me. David is writing this in this way of encouragement that's almost like, hey, don't you understand what God has rescued you from? Don't you understand what he has brought you out of? Don't worship him, magnify him. There's like this, he's like worship leading here, like, come on, people, don't you understand? Now that would be like a horrible worship leading experience, right? If Josh got up this morning, he said, you guys are not worshiping, you need to worship. Everybody would be like, all right, kind of sit back down and that would be a horrible leadership way. But that's kind of the way that David's writing it here. Don't you understand? Magnify the Lord. Worship him with us. Like, this is important. And what this is it's as we come together and we have people from different backgrounds, different races, different financial status, different upbringings, like all the things that we know about the diversity of our culture. When we come together and we worship together, it gives us a glimpse and a picture of what eternity is going to look like. It gives us a picture of what the throne room of God is going to look like when every tribe, every nation, every tongue kneels before the throne of God and worships, singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. It is a beautiful picture of eternity when we worship together. We just get a small glimpse of it on Sunday mornings. Worship, this word magnify, means to make great. We make great the name of God with our worship and thanks for all that he has done for us. And here is the biggest key that we have to understand about worship, is that worship is not about making us feel better. Worship, true biblical worship, is not about making us and ourselves feel better. True worship is about giving glory and honor to the Lord. There's been a shift over the last probably 5-10 years that I've really appreciated as somebody that appreciates worship music. I grew up in a very musical home. My dad's a worship pastor in Florida, and I love worship music, and I listen to it, most all of what I listen to, and then some country, but most all of worship. But in that, there's a shift that has kind of taken place where if you start noticing it, there's all these songs about 10 years ago were all about us. They were all about what we're getting, what I need, what I want, instead of saying, no, worship is not about us. Worship is about the King. And so we turn our attention. You start to see the shift in all these songs that we're starting to sing. It's like, it's all about giving glory and honor to the Lord, singing about the goodness of God. You're great, you're powerful, you're mighty, all the things, right? It's like there's this shift that has taken place. Worship, biblical worship, is not about us, it's about the Lord. Verse 4. It says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears. I sought the Lord. How do you seek the Lord? How do you seek the Lord? Something that we're passionate about around here, you see it on our mission statement, you see it in all the things that we talk about, is the building of everyday followers of Jesus. When we planted Collective, we saw and we understood that the suburban life is that we see many times as church as something we check a box on Sundays. We go to work, we come home, we take our kids to sports, we come back, we eat dinner, we go to sleep. We don't talk about Sunday, we don't talk about church. We kind of live our life, and then Sunday comes and it's like, because I grew up in church and because my parents brought me to church, I'm going to go to church. We want to wake ourselves up, wake up our community that says this is not about Sunday mornings. This is about you taking responsibility for your own relationship with the Lord. And so if we're going to seek the Lord, it's not going to happen just one time a week, only on Sunday mornings. But it should be done consistently. And if we want to be a people that seek the Lord, we have to make time for it. We have to prioritize it. Because here's the reality. I know that we're all busy, right? We all have schedules. We all have things that we're working through. Everybody's busier than we've ever been before. But you always make time for what you prioritize. You will always make time for what you prioritize. So if you ever find yourself saying like, hey, I'm just a little bit too busy for devotion time in the morning, maybe you should ask yourself, what am I prioritizing over time with the Lord? And instead of giving lip service to God, we need to make our time with him a priority. It's got to be. Everyday followers. And he continues and he says, and he answered me and he delivered me from all my fears. Do you have somebody in your family that never answers their phone? Think about it for a moment. Somebody in your family that never answers their phone. There's a lot of head turning happening right now. There's usually one person in every family, if not more. It's like this, their life's goal is like, I'm just never going to answer the phone. Which is weird because you see them on their phone, but they still never answer it. Like if you were in an emergency with that person and you are in an emergency, like your life or death, and you had to call somebody, like that's the first person you don't call because you know they're just not going to answer. And if you're not sure, it's you. Thankfully, that's not how God responds to our prayers. What we sometimes see prayer as is like we're just kind of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what would stick, right? It's like I'm just going to throw these things out, and if I get an answer, then the Lord heard that one, but he must not have heard all the other ones. That's what we see prayer as sometimes. That's not prayer. We believe and we trust that God hears and that he still answers the prayers of his people. We believe that. We trust that. A.W. Tozer said it this way: to pray without expectation is to misunderstand the whole concept of prayer in relationship with God. To misunderstand. If we don't pray without expectation, God is inviting us. And he's inviting us to come and to commune with him, to communicate with him. And I want you to think about the awe and the wonder that draws up in your mind where you realize and you understand the creator of the universe is saying, I want you to sit and to talk with me and to pray with me. The creator of the universe. When I hear that, I'm like, who am I? That's why David's words come back to so strong where it's like, who am I that you are even mindful of me, Lord? The creator of the universe is saying, I want you to commune with me. I want you to sit with me. I want to have fellowship with you. There's an invitation that he's giving us. That he wants us to communicate with him, and he wants to communicate back with us. Just an honest question to ask yourself is, how's your prayer life currently? How's your prayer life currently? Now, I'm not going to be prescriptive, and I'm not going to say, well, if you're not spending an hour with the Lord every morning, or if you're not spending 4 hours, then you're just a failure as a Christian. That's not the point. There's going to be different seasons of life and different things that come along, but how's your prayer life? I heard a pastor ask it this way. If God answered yes to all of your current prayers, would it change the world? If not, then we're not praying enough and we're not praying big enough. Now, here's where the tension comes in. Because all of us, we've all prayed for something that seemed good, that seemed right, that seemed something that would be, like we would say, is in the will of the Lord. A young mom that comes up with cancer, and it's like everybody joins and prays. You got people all over the country. A child that ends up with some rare disease, and it's like, hey, we're gonna pray, we're gonna intercede, we're gonna go for those things like that. We've all prayed for stuff like that didn't happen. Healing didn't come. The answer didn't come. How do we respond when what we pray for doesn't come? Or it's not answered in the way that we think it should be answered? Do we still trust that God hears us? Do we still trust that he's responding to our prayers? P.T. Forsyth says it this way: we shall come one day to a heaven where we shall gratefully know that God's great refusals were sometimes the true answers to our truest prayer. We may not know it or see it on this side of eternity, But I do trust that. I believe that one day when we spend eternity with the Lord, we're going to see that all of his answers to our prayers were yes, but it may not have been a yes that we were looking for in the moment. Think about your life right now. If God said yes to everything that you've prayed for from the time that you could pray until the time that the age that you are now, your life would be a disaster, wouldn't it? My life would be a disaster. My life would look drastically different than what it looks like right now. And so it takes faith and trust in the Lord, saying, I don't always understand. This is painful. I don't get it, and that's why I'm not the Lord, but I'm going to put my trust in you, God. He hears me. He answers me. And he rescues me from all my fears. Let's look at verse 5. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. Those who look to him are radiant, and they shall never be ashamed. This points back to Moses in Exodus chapter 34, his experience when he's with God on Mount Sinai. It says, verse 29, it says, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand as he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with the Lord. He'd been talking with the Lord. One of the things that I have found out in my life, in my short life of following Jesus, is that you can tell when somebody has spent a long life of spending a lot of time with Jesus. You can tell when somebody has spent a long life of following Jesus. There are certain people that I just want to attach myself to, that I just want to sit with them and hear their life experiences and how they processed it with God. There's something about that maturity of a lifelong follower of Jesus that you just like, I want to glean from that. Their face shines. It's radiant like Jesus. It's radiant like Moses coming off of the mountain. I have a pastor, mentor of mine, that spends 3 to 4 hours every single day praying and worship and giving dedicated time to the Lord. Every time I see this pastor, he's a pastor of a very large church, and every time I see this pastor, he says, Derek, I've been praying for you every day. There's power in that. And I know that he's not giving me lip service. I know that he means it. I know that he's got a list that he's working through and he's praying for every single day. This is, I find myself just wanting to be with this person because I know that he's been with Jesus. I want to attach myself to somebody like that. Don't we want to be a people that when others are around us, they don't see just our personality or that person's pretty cool, that person's fun, I really like their personality, but instead they start saying, when they're around us, they say, I see Jesus in that person. Isn't that the goal of the follower of Jesus? Like, I want people to see not me, but I want to be a mirror of a reflection of who Jesus is. It's this lifelong sanctification process, growing in our Christ-likeness. Is your face radiant? Is it shining with Jesus? Verse 6. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and he saved him out of all of his troubles. Prayer was never meant to be reserved only for emergencies, but that should not keep us from crying out to God in those emergencies. I don't think God, if your prayer life isn't what you need it to be or what you think it should be or what the scriptures tell us it should be, it's not like God's going to be up in heaven saying, well, now you want to pray? I don't think he's doing that. He's a kind God. He wants his children to respond to him. But we also cannot reserve prayer just for emergencies. This poor man that David talks about here, this is not financial poor. This is not from possession standpoint, but this was his status, his helplessness. Remember the situation? David is basically hiding from two people that are trying to kill him and take his life. And he cries out to God. He says, I have nothing to offer. Lord, you anointed me. You pulled me out of a field. You had Samuel anoint me in front of everybody. And now Saul's trying to kill me. I fled him. And now King Achish is trying to kill me. I have nothing to offer, God. I'm fleeing for my life. I'm helpless. And he says, I cried out to the Lord. in my poorness and my humbleness with nothing to offer. And friend, this is the call of the gospel. This right here is the call of the gospel. Jesus says it in his Sermon on the Mount where he says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit who are helpless, who cannot save themselves." This is the message that we need to hear this morning, is that we who are born into a broken world, the reality of sinfulness, we have nothing to offer the Lord other than ourselves. We can't come to him and barter. Hey, God, don't you see, like, I've been pretty disciplined. I've been pretty disciplined, and I think that I deserve. No. That's not how it works. We come to the Lord and we cry out, "Lord, I'm poor. Poor in spirit. Poor in the things of this world. I have nothing that I can offer you. Will you save me?" And God, in his mercy, reaches down from heaven and he rescues us and he saves us. In my poorness, this poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. There's kind of a dual thing that's happening here. On one hand, you have the message of the gospel that says, I have nothing to offer. God rescues me. He saves me. And if you're here today and you've not trusted in Jesus, that's the best news that you could ever hear in your life. But there's also the other side of this, that there are some here today that you're in a situation where you're like, I can't take a next step without the Lord. And again, my encouragement to you is that is the best place for you to be. If you can live your life without being fully dependent on the Lord, you're probably not living a life of faith. So let's get to the end of ourselves. Let's get to the end of our rope. Bring it on. Because I want to be dependent on the Lord. I want to be fully dependent on him. And just know, the Lord hears you. That's what David says, verse 7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. There's some scholarly debate about what the angel of the Lord actually means. But many scholars say that when you see this word angel of the Lord, this phrase angel of the Lord, it is the pre-incarnate Jesus that comes and encamps around his people. They call it a Christophany. Christophany. Now, there's some debate about it, right? And so it's not like solid, like 100% every scholar agrees on this issue, but some say this is a pretty important thing for us to study. And a good study for you to do is to go through the Old Testament and see where it says the angel of the Lord and see what happens in those moments. In this instance, with David, we're not 100% sure, but it's pretty amazing to think about, isn't it? That the Lord himself would encamp around you. This word encamp, in the Hebrew, it takes an offensive language. It's not like we sometimes see angels, like I think maybe it's because of Precious Moments Bibles when we were children, but we see these angels, like little fat, chubby babies in diapers, and it's like, that's what an angel looks like. That's what we see angels as. But that's not the description of an angel in the scriptures. The description that David is writing here, it's offensive, like a goalie guarding a net in a soccer game, or an offensive lineman protecting their quarterback. It's like, I'm going on the offensive to protect you from the schemes of the enemy. These are angel warriors. These are not little fat chubby babies. These are warriors that are encamping around you as a follower of Jesus. You put your trust in God and you fear him in awe and wonder. And he's like, no, I've got angels that surround you that will protect you from the fiery darts of the enemy. And I don't know about you, but that gives me great comfort as a follower of Jesus. When you put your trust in him, and when you live with a fear of God, not scared, but awe and reverence, the angel of the Lord encamps around his people. and he delivers him from all of his fears. The Psalms, they're an interesting book to study because there's so many different topics. I feel like this morning that I preached about 10 different sermons because it's line after line of just like boom, 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 just coming after you. So I want to kind of recap just a little bit for us to think about what David wrote here. And so 3 main themes that David gives us: worship, prayer, and helplessness. Worship, prayer, and helplessness. The worship part, he talks about blessing the Lord, magnifying the Lord, exalting the Lord, putting our attention on him and singing and glorifying all that he's done in our lives and for who he is as a person. Prayer, to seek the Lord through prayer and to spend dedicated time communing with the Father. And then helplessness. It's finding yourself in a moment of helplessness like David, where it's like, I can't do it without you, Lord. I don't want to do it without you, Lord. And so as you see these 3 things up on the screen, which one of these 3 areas do you feel like that you're more drawn to today? You should think for a moment. Keep it in your mind, and this may be strange for some of you, but I believe that God still wants to speak to his people through the power of the Spirit. And so what I'm going to ask you to do just for a moment is keep those 3 words in your mind, and let's just spend 2 minutes, a minute maybe. Let's just invite the Spirit of God to speak to us. What area are we more drawn to? Maybe it's something that you need to grow in, like prayer, and it's like you feel like, hey, I know that I need to spend time in prayer. I need to not just give lip service to him, but I need to really spend time in it. Maybe it's the worship, blessing the Lord no matter your circumstances. Or maybe you're the third one, helplessness, where it's like, I'm in a pretty difficult situation. I don't have anything to offer anymore. So you bow your heads with me and just let the Lord speak to us for a moment.